can sit, if no, I'll tell you what we could do. If you could put all those boxes on the table, I can use my walker, which is higher, and then I can sit and see everybody. But I knew I had to walk a lot, so I held on to the walker, and with the wind blowing in my face, wasn't exactly goes very easy this way. Now I can see everybody. My name is Eva Kor, and I am a survivor of the Holocaust, a survivor of Auschwitz, and also a survivor of medical experiments. My presentation will be three-part, hopefully. A short, brief presentation about my survival. Also will be the lessons that I have learned from my tragic life. And there I hope we have some time for some questions, because you as teachers, that's your opportunity to ask questions. It was about 69 years ago, in May, when our cattle car train came to a sudden stop. We were packed in the cattle car for 4 days. We had no water, no food, and we were packed like sardines. Finally, the cattle car door was opened. Thousands of people poured out from the cattle car onto a little strip of land that was covered with cement, called the selection platform. There was in the cattle car, in addition to about 100 people, there was my father, Alexander Moses, age 44, my mother, Jaffa, age 38, my oldest sister, Edie, 14, my middle sister, Alice, 12, and Miriam and I, who were 10 years old, were identical twins. As soon as we stepped down from the cattle car, my mother grabbed my twin sister and me by the hand. We were her youngest children, and she was hoping that as long as she could hold on to us, that she could protect us. Everything was very confusing, and everything seemed to be moving very fast. In my childish curiosity, I turned around and tried to figure out what that place was, and I realized that my father and 2 older sisters have disappeared in the crowd. Never ever did I see them again. That was 10 minutes from the time we stepped down from the cattle car. Miriam and I were holding on to mother for dear life. When a Nazi was running and yelling in German, twins, twins, we did not volunteer any information. We didn't really know what worked here. He noticed us, we were dressed alike and we looked alike, and he demanded to know if we were twins. And my mother didn't know what to say. She asked hesitantly if that was good, and the Nazi said yes, and my mother said yes. At that moment, another Nazi came, pulled my mother in one direction, we were pulled in the opposite direction. We were crying, she was crying. All I really remember is seeing my mother's arms stretched out in despair as she was pulled away. I never got to say goodbye to her, but I really did not understand that this would be the last time that we would see her. And all that took 30 minutes. From the time we stepped down from the cattle car, Miriam and I no longer had a family. We were all alone, and we had no idea what would happen to us. We became part of a very special group of children. First of all, we were twins. These were all little girls, twins, aged 2 to 16, and one mother was permitted to stay with her 7-year-old daughters by some miracle. We were marched to a huge building. Our clothes were removed. We sat naked for most of the day without really knowing what would happen to us. It was late in the afternoon when our processing began. They cut our hair short. We used to have braids, and the mother's head was shaved. Our clothes were returned with a huge oil-painted cross on the back of the dress, and the mother was given striped prison uniform. Then they lined us up for registration and tattooing. When my turn came, I decided to give them as much trouble as a 10-year-old could. 4 people restrained me, 2 Nazis and 2 women prisoners, while they heated a pen-like gadget with a needle at the end, and they heated it over the flame of a lamp. And when the needle got hot, they dipped it into ink, and then they burned into my left arm, dot by dot, the capital letter A-7063. Miriam became capital A-7064. Auschwitz was the only Nazi camp that tattooed its image. My husband is a survivor of 4 years in Buchenwald. He does not have a tattoo. Once we were processed, we were taken to the barrack. These barracks were actually modular horse barns, filthy and crude. We were huddled in our filthy bunk beds, crawling with lice and rats. We were starved for human kindness, and we were starved for the love of the mothers and fathers that we once had. But we had a fierce determination to live one more day, survive one more experiment. That first night, when I saw the rats crawling on the floor and Miriam and I couldn't cope with that, we didn't know how to deal with it, we went to the latrine, and there on the filthy latrine floor were the corpses of 3 children. Their bodies were naked and shriveled. And this when I immediately understood that that could happen to Miriam and me. I have never seen anybody dead before. And so, right then and there, I made a silent pledge that I will do anything and everything within my power to make sure that Miriam and I shall not end up on the filthy latrine floor. From the moment we left the latrine, I did everything instinctively, and I did everything instinctively right. I never let any doubt or fear enter my mind. Then in my mind I actually had an image of me and Miriam walking out of this camp alive. And I never let go of that image until Liberation Day. We would be awakened every morning at 5. By 6 we were outside for roll call. Then we would go back to the barrack for Dr. Mengele's daily inspection. After Mengele left, and he would count us. He wanted to know how many guinea pigs he had every day. And after Mengele left, we got breakfast, which was, in Auschwitz, in our case, was nothing more but a brownish liquid they called coffee. At noon, if we were in the barrack, we got a stuff that looked like cream of wheat, except it was impossible to spoon, cut, or swallow. So I am sure it was not cream of wheat. I believe that they gave that to us just to torment us. At night, we would get a piece of bread, about 2.5 inches dark, but it tasted okay. And that was the only thing that filled our stomachs. Hunger was the overwhelming problem. We were always hungry. After a few days, I decided that at night I could sleep even though I was starving. But the days were so long without any food. So it made sense to me to save my bread for the next morning. But the next morning my bread was gone, stolen by those huge rats. So I had a difficult decision to make every night, and that was the decision that I could make in my destiny. Should I eat my bread tonight, or should I gamble and try to have some bread next morning? The Nazis could have given us the bread in the morning, as they did, with the inmates who were going to work, but we were not given even that little privilege. After breakfast, we would be taken for experiments. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we would be put naked in a room for at least 6 and sometimes 8 hours. Every part of my body was measured, compared to charts, and compared to my twin sister. These experiments were not dangerous, but they were unbelievably demeaning. The only way that I could cope with it is by blocking it out of my mind, because they made me feel like I was nothing more but a living piece of meat. And even in Auschwitz, that was difficult to cope with. On alternate days, on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, we would be taken to another lab that I call the blood lab. There, they would tie both of my arms to restrict the blood flow. They would take a lot of blood from my left arm and give me a minimum of 5 injections into my right arm. Those were the deadly ones. The content of those injections, of course we didn't know then, but unfortunately I still do not know today. After one of those injections, I became very ill with a very high fever. And the next visit to the lab, I knew I was in trouble. They did not examine me. They did not tie my arms for blood taking. They measured my fever. And I knew I was in trouble. I knew I had a very high fever because I was trembling in the August sun, even though the sun was burning my skin. Both legs and arms were swollen and very painful, and I had huge red patches throughout my body. I was taken to the hospital, which in this case was a barrack filled with people who couldn't even move. They were in their bunk beds screaming. I call it the barrack of the living dead because that is the way they looked. Next morning, Dr. Mengele came in. He never examined me. He looked at my fever chart, and then he declared, laughing sarcastically, he said, "Too bad. She's so young. She has only 2 weeks to live." I knew he was right, but I refused to die. So I made a second silent pledge that I will prove Dr. Mengele wrong. I will survive and be reunited with my sister. So for the next 2 weeks, I have only one memory. I would often wake up on the barrack floor. I was crawling because I no longer could walk. And I was crawling because I found out that there was one faucet with water at the other end of the barrack. This barrack was not allocated any food, nor water, nor medicine. As I was crawling, I would fade in and out of consciousness, and I kept telling myself, I must survive, I must survive. After 2 weeks, my fever broke, and I felt a lot stronger, and it took another 3 weeks before my fever chart showed normal, and I was released and reunited with Miriam and the other twins. Miriam looked very sick, and then I asked her, what have they done to her? She said, I cannot talk about it, I will not talk about it, and we never talked about Auschwitz until 1985. In 1985, I again asked her, Miriam, do you remember when I was taken to the hospital? She said, yes. I said, but what happened to you while I was in the hospital? She said, for the first 2 weeks, I was under Nazi surveillance, doctors studying me 24 hours a day. They were waiting for something to happen. I don't know what that was because they didn't tell me, and I don't know if it happened or it didn't happen. And it was the same 2 weeks that Mengele said I would die. I told her it didn't happen. I spoiled the experiment. I survived. And amazingly, Miriam was not killed. So I asked her, what happened to you after the 2 weeks? She said, I was taken back to the lab, injected with all kinds of things that we ultimately found out after she got married and was expecting her first baby. She developed severe kidney infections that did not respond to any antibiotics. The second pregnancy pregnancy in 63 got worse, and this is when the doctors in Israel found out that Miriam's kidneys never grew larger than the size of a 10-year-old child. I begged her not to have any more children because every pregnancy was a life crisis. But she had a third child in 1981. Her kidneys after that started failing very fast. And by 1987, Miriam needed to go on dialysis or have a kidney transplant. I donated my left kidney because she refused to go on dialysis. We were a perfect match, except the doctors were worried that even though we were identical twins, that the experiment might have altered something in our makeup because we were used in different experiments. So they gave her anti-rejection medication, and at that hospital they have already had 2,000 transplantees and non-developed cancerous polyps. Miriam a year later developed cancerous polyps in her bladder. They tried to treat that, but they did not succeed because that was 1987, and in 1993, June 6, Miriam died. The cancer metastasized everywhere. I will just go back to the camp for a very brief observation. Number one, what is important to me, and it might be important to some of you who are teaching young children. Up to age 13, children function, in my opinion, completely differently than teenagers and grown-ups. I thought when I was in Auschwitz that the whole world was one big concentration camp because children lose their point of reference. I thought that everybody lived in a place like I lived, without parents, without any food, in miserable conditions, surrounded by guards day and night. Until end of August, when an airplane appeared on the skies of Auschwitz, it was flying very low. I could see the American flag on one of the wings. That was my first sign of hope, that somebody was trying to free us. That gave me, it energized me to live one more day, because hope was a very short supply there. Survive one more experiment. The air raids increased greatly and until liberation. And on January 27, 1945, Auschwitz was liberated by the Soviet army. We were free. We were alive. We have triumphed over unbelievable evil. And for me to realize that we were free and alive, and my promise to myself that first night in the latrine became a reality, was an unbelievable experience. I want to thank you for being so attentive and listening to my very short version of my survival story. But why am I doing it? And why did I drive from Terre Haute to Lafayette? He's a nice guy. But I don't know. Yeah, he's a good guy, a good teacher. But when I lecture to students, and probably it's even more appropriate for students than for you, but I think you might be able to use it. My life lessons. Life lesson number one is never ever give up on yourself or on your dreams. Because if you give up, nothing will happen. I did not give up on fighting for my life. And when in particular, I don't think that there are any teenagers here, but when I talk to teenagers, you're not a teenager. You are?
Yeah.
How old are you?
16.
You are. So what are you doing here? This is for teachers.
Listening. She's helping too.
Growing up when you are a teenager is very hard. And I think it's very hard, even if you live in the United States. Not only do I know it, I remember it. But if you give up on what you want to accomplish in life, it will never happen. So keep hammering away at what you want, your dream is, or what you want to accomplish. And I guarantee to you that your wonderful mind will come up with answers that will work. Now, just to give you one little example that I am using lately, because I use different examples through the 33 years I have been lecturing. The museum in Terre Haute, it's called Kendall's Holocaust Museum. We have brochures for you for anybody who wants to pick up any literature there. I brought plenty. Was burned by an arsonist. And we rebuilt it and reopened it on April of 2005, and the building is very nice, except in the bathroom under the sink. There was an ugly spot about that size. It looked very dirty gray, and when I touched it, it felt crunchy, it had a texture to it. So I tried Spick and Span, Mr. Clean, Ajax, Comet. Didn't budge. I tried different cleaning supplies for 6 months, and then I gave up on it. Well, about 9 months, and what I did actually, I covered it up with a trash can. So as long as I didn't see it, I didn't have to deal with it. Now the staff knew that I was very upset about that dirty spot, and they couldn't figure out what to clean it with. So that was the agreement. We covered it and Eva didn't see it. 9 months ago, I'm going to the bathroom and somebody moved the trash can and didn't cover the spot. Was staring at me. So I said, today I am going to get rid of that spot. So I went to the supply room, and on one of the shelves, there was a little bottle of Kubigan. I don't know what that was for. I read instructions, remove spot, but I have tried everything I knew on that spot. I said, well, maybe I try it. I was amazed. In 1 minute, my spot was gone. I was so excited. I finally beat that spot and I got rid of it. What it actually was, as I was cleaning it, it looked like black tar dropped from the pipe installation when they were installing the pipe. It baked on the floor with the dust all around in the construction. And of course, regular cleaning will not take it off. Then I wondered about it. How come I didn't use that Goopy gun before? It's been there for 7 years on that same shelf since we opened the museum. So that was right in front of me. Why didn't I use it? Could it be, do any of us really, really know how our minds work? Do we know it? We hope. Could it be that there are solutions to many of our problems right in front of us and we do not see it? And if we give up, we will never find it. Because this wasn't any big solution. This was just a little button that was right in front of me. And I can tell you later on when I talk about forgiveness, that came about the same way. I didn't give up. So, life lesson number 1 for anybody, because I am not a teenager anymore when I found that thing. Never give up on yourself or on your dreams. I guarantee to you, to every single one of you wants to try, that you are going to find a solution to your problem. And it's going to work. But if you give up, nothing will happen. Life lesson number 2. Prejudice was one of the reasons that Adolf Hitler and the Nazis succeeded in rising to power. The number 1 reason was the bad economy. The tremendous depression in Germany, unemployment was 38.5%, and Hitler said to his fellow countrymen, you don't have jobs, you don't have hope, you don't have food, and it's also, now we have to blame it on somebody. the Jews. As I look around in the world today, prejudice is still with us. And I will confess to you, I am prejudiced. When I came to this country, I would go downtown. My children were 1 and 3. I could dress them up. I would dress up nicely. I would never have curls in my hair or anything. It had to be perfect. Everybody was dressed nicely. Today, anywhere I go, everybody looks like they're heading to the picnic or to the beach. Young people look very sloppy. Very sloppy. I tell them, since this is not a classroom, these are teachers, that if I rule the world, I would put all students in uniforms. Did you like that? Yes. The teachers would like it. But the students, when I had them sitting at the museum, oh, that's awful. And I said, why is it awful? Well, I want to be an individual. I said, I have a words for you. Every single one of you is unique and is an individual. You don't need to wear these crazy clothes. You could all wear the same clothes and every single one of you would be unique. But do you know why you go to school? Oh, sure, to learn. I said, come here, look at that girl with her blouse cut so low, I can see her belly button. What are you? I said, by the way, did you come to the museum? You saw that we are going to have a sexy movie here. Why would you dress like that? I actually kicked out 2 kids. One girl came in with her mother, and she had a pair of jeans. I have never seen anything like that. It was 1 striped jean, 1 striped skin. All the way from her panty line to the bottom. And there were 2 pieces of material holding that together, and she designed it. She was sitting right in front of me. I said, what kind? Don't you think that you're going to a Holocaust museum, you should have a little bit of respect? This wasn't the circus. And I said to the mother, why did you let her wear this outfit? Oh, I thought it was okay. I said, could you cover your legs that were sticking out in every direction with a coat or something? No, we are going to leave. I said, okay, if you don't want to cover your legs, please leave, because it takes away from my concentration. I'm talking about serious things, and I don't want to keep staring at that masquerade. I don't like guys with ponytails, with earrings, body piercings, tattoos. I said, why do you mutilate your body? You've got beautiful young skin. Why mutilate all of that? Actually, if I were a coach for any team, or the president of a college, I would not let those basketball players, football players, tattoo their body and flaunt it. When they have a tattoo, they are always flaunting it. It doesn't belong in a college. After college, if you are crazy enough to do it, if you are in a college or in a school, you should not do that. So anyway, 12 years ago, I was invited to lecture at South Vigo High School. And I was heading to the auditorium, and in front of me were 3 young men. Now there is the style, baggy pants. The crotch of the pant was the height of the leg. And they were walking barely. Of course, if they had to run for their lives, they couldn't. They were holding up the pant with a hand, and the bottoms were cleaning the hallway. And I was walking behind them, taking in that sight. One of them dropped a book, and then he had the audacity to bend down. I saw places where the sun in Vigo County School. First of all, I was so embarrassed. I would have never expected anything like that to happen in a school. Second, I got mad. My tax money is paying for a school like that? So I was heading to the auditorium and I went straight to the teacher who invited me and I told him what happened and I said, these three guys, they look like bums and drug addicts. They don't care about the way they look. And bums and drug addicts don't care. So next time you dress like a bum, don't be surprised if they treat you like a bum. So he said to me, no, they are very good students. I was really surprised, and he said they never ever used any drugs. Well, I realized that even though I still don't like this, but I have got to get to know the person, make an effort to get to know them, and judge them on their merits. So I finished my lecture, and I opened it up to questions where one girl stood up and said, Mrs. Kor, that prejudice problem is a very big problem, isn't it? I said, yes, it is. She said, well, I would like to help you with it. Can I do something for you? I said, I haven't thought about it, but maybe before I leave here I will have an idea. And this is, I did, and this is what I told them, and this is what I'm telling you. I'm going to take you all on a little imaginary trip. We're all going to carry a rock in our hand, stand on an imaginary bridge overlooking a very quiet imaginary lake. I take my rock and drop it into the water and you will see a ripple. All of you take your rocks and drop them into the water and what you will see, ripple, touching, ripple. If we realize that every single thing we do in our lives touches the lives of many people and often it has far-reaching effect. So all any of us have to do when we meet new people, try to get to know them, treat them with fairness and respect, and judge them on their actions and content of their character. And we can make a difference, one person at a time, one ripple at a time. When I have a group of parents with 10-year-olds on Saturdays, or the homeschooling, which is competition to you, so let's not talk about it. I tell them that if they want to do a little experiment with their children, fill the bathtub halfway, let the water settle, then take 2 rocks and drop them at each end of the tub, and it's interesting for everybody to see how ripples meet. Life lesson number 3, I have forgiven the Nazis, I have forgiven everybody. How many of you here, most of you are grown-ups, could forgive somebody who murdered your family, who was out to kill you? Raise your hands. Not even one? Boy, we are in big trouble. Other question is, can I do anything to change what happened to me? No. That is the greatest tragedy, that once it happens, there is nothing you can do about it. I used to be a very good victim. I hated the Nazis, I hated the Germans, I hated the Hungarians, and come to think of it, I did not really like too many people. What the tragedy of victims is, as I can describe it to you, that I was very angry with the world. I had all the reasons to be angry, but the people that I took it out on were my children. I yelled at them way, way too much. And that's what happens to victims. They take it out on somebody else. And I didn't even understand. I knew that what had to do with my past. We didn't talk about it very much. I never made a secret out of it. And in 1993, shortly after Miriam died, actually, I found out about it and I received a telephone call from my brother-in-law after I returned from an open house as a realtor on a Sunday afternoon, and he left a message telling me that my sister died. I called Israel immediately, and I told him that I will catch the first flight that I can find to Israel. He don't bother. The funeral is in 10 hours, we can't wait for you. I pleaded with him. I said, I never buried any member of my family. I wanted to say goodbye to her. I wanted to touch her. I somehow wanted to verify that she is indeed dead. And I also wanted to say goodbye to my kidney. Well, she went, she took my kidney with her. But he kept saying no. So I was left with tremendous pain. I would wake up, it was about 3.5 weeks, every night screaming, suffocating. I could feel exactly the way she suffocated when she died. Her lungs were filled with cancer. And I will never understand how that happened, but I am very glad that it did. About 3.5 weeks later, unrelated to Miriam's death, I received a telephone call from a professor at Boston College who said to me, Eva, I have heard you speak at a conference on Nazi medicine, and I am doing one at Boston College, and I would like you to come and lecture to some doctors. And I said, wonderful. I just love to lecture to doctors. And he said, why is that? I said, that I go to the doctor, and the doctors tell me I'm too fat, which is true. I don't eat the right food. I don't exercise enough, and after they chew me out, I have to pay them. So I would like to tell the good doctors what they do wrong, because in my opinion, they do plenty of things. And after I chew them out, I look forward to them paying me. That is my formula of getting even with the doctors. So he said to me, okay, Eva, but when you come to Boston, it would be really nice if you could bring with you a Nazi doctor. Stunned at that request, I said to him, where do you think I can find one of those guys? Last time I looked in the yellow pages, they went red. He said, you like to joke a lot. I said, Dr. Michalczyk, in the last 3.5 weeks, I cried so much that I don't think I have any more tears left. And so he said, well, think about it and maybe you come up with some kind of an idea. Now here I was, mourning the death of my sister, and suddenly I was diverted, my attention was diverted in trying to find a Nazi doctor. I remember that the last project that Miriam and I worked on was a documentary done by a German television about the Mengele twins. And in that documentary that we finished in 1992, there was a Nazi doctor from Auschwitz. He was not my doctor, but he was a friend of Mengele's. And if he was alive in 1992, I thought he might be alive in 1993. So I faxed a letter to Germany, to the television network, and told them what happened. And I asked them to give me Dr. Munch's telephone number in the memory of Miriam. I tried to get that telephone number a year earlier, 92, but they refused to give it to me. An hour or so later, I got a long sympathy letter and Dr. Munch's telephone number. I don't speak German. My mother tongue is Hungarian. I don't speak much Hungarian now either. It's been 60 years since I spoke Hungarian, but I understand it. So I called a friend who speaks German to invite Dr. Munch to the Boston conference. He called me back next day and told me Dr. Munch is not coming to Boston, but he's willing to meet with me at his house in Germany. And that he found a Dutch television, because he lived in Amsterdam, that's willing to come and film it, so I can take the film to the conference, even willing to pay for my expenses if I sign a release that they can broadcast it in Holland. So I am heading to Germany to meet a Nazi doctor. First of all, I want you to know, from that moment on, I went on a diet. I wanted to look as sharp as I possibly could. I did not want a naughty doctor to feel sorry for me. I bought myself a nice new outfit. You will see it in the film, a navy blue with white polka dot pleated skirt, matching blouse, a white short sleeve jacket trimmed in navy blue, white shoes trimmed in blue. Before I arrived there, for 2 days, I could not close my eyes. Every nerve in my body was rebelling against what I was going to do. I didn't realize that I would be that nervous and that upset, but I was very curious if this Nazi doctor, who was a friend of Mengele, knew anything about our experiment. And second, I was curious, why was this Nazi doctor willing to meet with me? I arrived at his house. He treated me with the utmost respect, kindness, and consideration. Unfortunately, he knew nothing about our experiment, but he gave me a good interview for my Boston conference. And then, out of the blues, I have no idea, I never thought about it, never entered my mind before, I heard myself say, Dr. Munch, by any chance do you know anything about the gas chambers in Auschwitz? And his answer was immediately, this is the nightmare that I live with every single day of my life, and went on describing the operation of the gas chamber. In many films and books that I have read, it always said that the gas came from the shower heads. Dr. Munch said the gas did not come from the shower heads. He said the shower room was polished. The floors were gleaming, the shower heads were gleaming, everything was clean, and they would spread a lot of perfume. So people would feel really comfortable as they entered the shower room after the long trip on the cattle car. They were going to take a shower. Once the shower room was packed, the doors closed hermetically. Dr. Munch was stationed at a peephole looking in. The vent-like hatch opened in the roof. Canister of Zyklon B. Zyklon B looks like white gravel. They opened it and dropped it, and the Zyklon B pellets fell to the floor. It operated like dry ice. So the gas was rising from the floor. As people were suffocating, they were trying to get away from the rising gas, climbing on top of each other. What ended up being a mountain of intermingled human bodies, the strongest people ended up on the top of the pile. So when he saw that the people on the top of the pile stopped moving, he knew that everybody was dead, and he signed one death certificate stating 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, however many people were in that badge of killing. And he signed it that they were murdered or they were killed or they are dead. I had never heard about anything like that in my life, and I have been studying and been involved in researching the Holocaust seriously since 1978. I said to him immediately, this is a very important information. I have never heard about it. I want you to come with me to Auschwitz. I am going there in January of 1995, so we're 50 years to the liberation, and I want you to sign a document, just what you told me. But I want it signed with a company of witnesses, so nobody could say that you didn't sign it. And he said to me immediately, I would love to do that. I came back to Terre Haute, Indiana, and I was so excited. I will have a document signed not by a survivor, not by a liberator, but actually by a Nazi. So if I ever encounter a revisionist, I can take that document and shove it in their face. But I wanted to thank this Nazi doctor for his willingness to document the operation of the gas chamber. I did not know how to thank a Nazi doctor, nor did I know where I could find some ideas to how do you thank a Nazi. I didn't want to tell anybody about it because I thought people would think that I am crazy. So I went to the local Hallmark shop in their home. Well, where do you start looking? I mean, I needed to get some ideas, and I was hoping if I wrote lots of thank you cards, maybe I get some ideas. After 2.5 hours, 2 ladies came up to me, are you finding, because they were definitely surprised I was spending that much time there. Are you finding what you're looking for? I said, not really. Well, what are you looking for? Maybe we can help you find it. Should I tell them? I said, no, thank you very much, and I left. But see, I could not give up the idea of never ever giving up on my dream. In this case, my dream was to find something meaningful for this Nazi doctor. So I went back to life lesson number 1. For the next 10 months, while I was cooking, cleaning, driving the car, when my mind wasn't too busy, I kept asking myself, how can I thank this Nazi doctor? What can I give this Nazi doctor? Lots of ideas popped into my head. None seemed appropriate until 10 months later. There is a simple idea. How about a letter of forgiveness from me to Dr. Munch? I knew immediately that that was a meaningful gift. But what I discovered for myself was life-changing. I discovered that I, the little victim of Auschwitz, had the power to forgive. No one could give me that power, and no one could take it away. It was all mine to use it in any way I wished. And as I look at you, I want to remind you that every single one of you has that power. No one can give it to you and no one can take it away. It's yours to use in any way you wish. I began writing my letter to Dr. Munch and worked through a lot of pain. It took me another 4 months before I liked what I wrote. And then it occurred to me that somebody might read my letter and my spelling in English is atrocious. And I didn't want to be embarrassed. So I called my former English professor, told her what I was doing, and she got very excited about my idea, and we met about 3 times, and then she said to me, now Eva, that is very nice that you're forgiving this Dr. Munch, but you need to forgive Dr. Mengele. I said, no, this is just it. She said, I know. What I would like you to do when you go home tonight, visualize that you talk to Dr. Mengele and you tell him I forgive you because I want you to see how you feel about it. How will it make you feel when you do that? I thought that was an interesting exercise, and I did it. And when I said to Mengele, I forgive you, what I realized that I, the little guinea pig from Auschwitz, even had the power over Mengele. And I wasn't hurting anybody, so why couldn't I forgive him? And if I forgave Mengele, the worst of the worst, I decided to forgive everybody who has ever hurt me. We arrived in Auschwitz. I came with my children. Dr. Munch came with his. He signed his letter. Now, you're going to see the film. I am reading his letter, and I can tell you what the problem was there. The people who were going to produce it were directors of filmmaking from Eastern Illinois University. In my opinion, they were stupid. Because they wanted it read in English. We had it in English and in German. Dr. Munch wanted to read it in German. He didn't want to read such an important document in English. And I couldn't argue with these producers anymore, so I said, okay, I'll read it, let's just move ahead. So I am reading it. Dr. Moon signed the document. I read mine and signed it. And I immediately felt that all the pain that I have carried around on my shoulder for 50 years was lifted. That I was no longer a victim of Auschwitz, nor was I a prisoner of my tragic past. Because actually, any of you who have any pain or anger, you are still the prisoners of that person. I found that I was free from Auschwitz, free from Mengele. And the day I forgave the Nazis, which might be important for some of you, I forgave my parents, whom I hated all my life. And you might have students in your classes that are very angry with their parents, in divorced home, in abuse, where there is child abuse and neglect. Children carry that with them. I was, in 1995, I am 79 now, so I was 61. I still hated my parents, because when I got back from the camp, I was 11 years old. And I often said to myself, if my parents would have saved me from a destiny in Auschwitz, if my parents would have saved me from a destiny of growing up as an orphan, my life would have been much better, and I was right about that. But I finally understood that my parents did the best that they knew how. And that's true, in my opinion, for all parents, even those parents who are abusive. I don't think they know any better. If we understand that, and if children understand that. So I forgave my parents, and I forgave myself for hating my parents. Forgiveness, in my opinion, is nothing more and nothing less but an act of self-healing, self-liberation, and self-empowerment. And the empowerment, to me, is extremely important. Why? You could write a little essay, ask your student to write a definition. How does a person, or what do they think the definition of a victim is? How does anybody become a victim? I don't think anybody volunteers, hey, pick me, I want to be a victim. It doesn't happen that way. In my understanding, then when somebody takes away the power to rule our mind or our bodies or both, then we become victims. And unless we get that power back in some shape or form, we are never going to liberate ourselves. The world is filled, and I just came back from Texas yesterday, attended the Holocaust Memorial Walk of Remembrance, and there were 20 survivors. Only one has forgiven. The rest of them were angry with me. And I don't know why they are angry with me. How on earth am I hurting them? I still do not understand it. But interesting how even when I was talking to them, they do not understand. And I want you to really get it clear that the forgiveness is not for the perpetrator. And they tell me the Nazis do not deserve forgiveness. And I always ask them, do I deserve to live without the pain they inflicted upon me? And they always say, of course you do. I said, could you tell me, how could I accomplish that? If we teach people who have been wronged that they are the only ones who have the power to heal themselves, should I wait until Mengele will show up someday and say he was sorry? I mean, some of these things are absurd. It will never happen. So, I believe, and I was talking this morning for about 2.5 hours to some people, trying to pick my head, my brains, and she said, well, if people do not forgive, what happens? And I say, well, I look around at my fellow survivors. The great majority, I don't know the percentage, but at least 95 or 98% are still victims. I visited Israel a year and a half ago. They are tranquilizers and antidepressants. And When you want to talk to them, there is not much working up there anymore. It's a waste of human life. And they are passing on their pain to their children and grandchildren because children are suffering together with their parents. And then, if there is an opportunity, they feel justified to lash out at the children or grandchildren of the perpetrators. It becomes a vicious cycle. There is no end to it. So in my opinion, if we could help every victim, or the majority of the victims, when they are liberated, get food, shelter, medical assistance, legal help, and also a few workshops on how they can heal what's inside. Because if that's not healed, the rest is not going to work very well. This is why if I look around the world, I see more perpetrators, so much anger, so much fighting back and getting even, that there is no way we can live in peace in that world. So we are going to do, I don't exactly know when, but I'm going to have to make the time. We are working on an idea of inviting maybe half a dozen survivors of atrocities who have forgiven, and pick each brain to see what was their feeling, how did they come to that decision, and how do they think that we can help other people free themselves. I call anger a seed for what? Forgiveness is a seed for peace. Congratulations, you survived my lecture and I survived it too.